Samsung is extending its smartwatch portfolio with two models at this year's IFA conference in Berlin. The Gear S3 Classic and Gear S3 Frontier combine familiar features from last year's Gear S2 with fitness tracker functions of the Gear Fit 2. Discover the innovations Samsung integrated into this new smartwatch in our hands-on Samsung Gear S3. Release date and price. Pre-ordering is now available for the Samsung Gear S3 Frontier and Classic. The devices are being sold for the pre-order price of £349. If you pre-order before November 10th at 7 p.m. GMT, you'll receive a set of level active headphones. This is limited to the first 1,000 purchases. The Frontier is currently out of stock. Samsung brings to market the Gear S3 Classic and Gear S3 Frontier, two new smartwatches that follow up on last year's Gear S2 and Gear S2 Classic. At the present time, Samsung has given us no final price and availability of two new Gear S3 models. We suspect that the price of the Gear S2 will fall in the wake of these newcomers. The two new models are likely to cost between $349 and $400. Design and build quality. In terms of design and build quality, Samsung has with the Gear S3 Classic and Gear S3 Frontier not made any major changes. But it's evident that the two new smartwatches have a masculine look, and this is mainly due to the larger housing. While the bezel of the Gear S2 has no markings, the Gear S3 versions have engraved grids. Also masculine and massive are the 2mm wider wristbands. Instead, the Gear S2 S20mm wristbands, Samsung used 22mm versions. By default, the S3 Gear Classic comes with a leather strap, while the Gear S3 Frontier comes with a plastic strap. The latter has the advantage that it is resistant to sweat and water. It is also IP68 certified for dust and waterproofing. The displays of both Gear S3 versions are with 1.3 inches by 0.1 inches larger than the Gear S2 versions. However, the resolution remains 360 x 360 pixels. A Korean Samsung representative told us that the Gear S3 now supports anti-aliasing. This anti-aliasing prevents possible unpleasant effects such as jagged letters. During our brief hands-on time, we detected no significant differences in brightness between the display of the Gears S3 and S2. But as soon as we do our final test, we will share our findings for Gear S3 display performance. Software. Just as with the Gear Fit 2 and both Gear S2 versions, Samsung also uses in both Gear S3 versions the Tizen operating system. According to Samsung, there are now 10,000 apps for Samsung's smartwatch platform. For the Gear S3 S software, there are some improvements, such as that you can now install apps even directly from the smartwatch. This should avoid the need to use the companion smartphone app. Performance. As described in previous sections, Samsung has made small changes. This also applies to the hardware inside its new smartwatches. It has a dual-core processor, sounding like Samsung has changed nothing. But the innovation is in the detail. The processor will be an Exynos processor, which brings LTE capabilities with it. The new processor is enlarged to 768 MB of RAM, and 4 GB of internal memory is available for the operating system, apps and audio data. Anyone who wants to go jogging can use the Gear S3 as an MP3 player by means of a Bluetooth headset. In our hands-on time, we saw that the menus and apps turned and swiped quickly. Loading times of several apps were owed certainly to the connection quality of a paired Galaxy Note 7. Battery. Samsung has made a great leap forward in battery thanks to larger housing. The Gear S2 had a battery of 250 mAh, but the battery of the Gear S3 versions are now 380 mAh. After all, that's over 50% more battery capacity. How this impacts in conjunction with the optimized 1.3-inch Super AMOLED display, fresher processor and new sensors on the battery performance of the Gear S3, we cannot say currently. Once we have done our final test, we will show the battery life performance here. Early verdict. At first glance, the Gears S3, both as Classic, as well as Frontier, are convincing. It's a combination of fitness features of the Gear Fit 2 and smartwatch functionality of the Gear S2, all packed in a smart and larger housing. Samsung has extended its existing wearable portfolio with more of a targeting of men, so that now an almost complete lineup of wearables is available. The Samsung Gear S3 versions are not revolutionary, but enter the smartwatch market with sense and reason. If even iOS compatibility is guaranteed without restrictions, then I am very sure that many Apple Watch users might switch to the Gear S3. Not all, but this might gnaw on the ego of Apple.